I guess I should get the... Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Tattered cover. I think we're going to go ahead and get started.
Yeah, people will trickle in.
We may let other people may trickle in, and that's fine. And anybody who trickles in, join us or not, either way. So welcome to the Holocaust and Comic Books panel, sponsored by the Tattered cover and the Holocaust Awareness Institute at the University of Denver. And everybody's standing now. Welcome. Hi, please find a seat. Welcome, welcome. Plenty of good seats. So tonight we have, we're going to start over here, is Erin Christian at, I'm going to have to look, Caryl Middle School. She just switched, so she's newly at Caryl Middle School. Helen Starr, who is a second-generation Holocaust survivor. And my name is Selena Naumoff. I'm at the University of Denver in the Holocaust Awareness Institute. We're just going to give you a few things here, and welcome. We're glad you're here. You guys can sit. It felt really formal. That was incredibly formal what just happened right there.
Yeah, we're really an informal group, I promise.
Incredible. So Helen's gonna give you a little bit of introduction about the Holocaust itself and show you a few things that are gonna tie back. And I am going to tell you a historical overview of comic books in relation to the Holocaust. And then Erin is going to bring us home with graphic novels for the classroom. She actually teaches in the classroom with middle school and high school students, and so she has been there and seen it and will tell you many good things. And so, Helen, it's for you.
Thank you.
Would like to...
All right. First off, good evening to everybody, and only good health to you all, please. Okay, here we go. It's easy to forget key parts of history. As the years pass, the key events fade, and it can feel like a mystified story rather than a factual time in history. We can read books, see movies, view pictures, but can we really truly grasp the reality of the Holocaust? Think about that a second. I mean, everything is just graphic, right? We might forget that real people just like you and I actually lived through the Holocaust. The hard conversations have to take place. We need to feel the emotions and express the empathy for those few who survived and for those who did not survive. So we do not forget there were witnesses. Everybody thinks when we say the word do not forget, we must remember there were witnesses that have been silenced through deniers, hoaxers, many shows, many things out there, politics, etc. We're going to show you a movie here in a second, but some people have seen this movie, and I'm going to let you know before we even start, it is graphic, okay? But as I said here, they have to be told and shown. In 1945, Alfred Hitchcock and a team of fellow filmmakers went to Germany, the mission to document the Nazis' brutal attacks on humans. The world needed the proof that concentration camps were real, and to show how the injustices were created towards Jews and others for 6 long years. That's for those who just recently watched the Ken Burns documentaries, you will see, but still, they did not mention these type of things that I'm bringing up. The movie is called The Memory of the Camps, and this was done in 1985. It was commissioned by a panel that needed proof to show Nazis really were criminals, and they really did create an insane madness against people. The movie was never shown until 1985. One of the camps documented was Bergen-Belsen. And Bergen-Belsen's mass grave, more than 60,000 plus bodies were scattered all the way around besides in the graves. But only 23,500 were actually named. that left over 18,000 people that they really discarded and didn't care about. Because of America's inaction during the Holocaust, comic books became a valuable source of information for American Jews during the Holocaust and post-Holocaust. The valuable information was created by Bernard Krigstein in 1955. He created the comic book called The Master Race. The comic book documented Bergen-Belsen. Krigstein did not know about the Hitchcock movie that was recorded or the horrors that happened at Bergen-Belsen because they never knew one another. There was a 10-year difference, but he got it right. The Master Race is about a concentration camp survivor who encounters the commandant of the camp who fled anonymously after the war. They ran into one another in a New York subway train. The comic book reflects back to Bergen-Belsen concentration camp. Fanny Starr, a Holocaust survivor from Denver and my late mom, was liberated from Bergen-Belsen on April 15th, 1945. Again, the documentary is called Memory of the Camps. The movie is graphic. The Holocaust was graphic. The comic books, again, is called Master Race. Now, before we start the slides, the slide images we're going to be showing you here and the movie are a sample of what Fanny and Zisa Starr saw every single minute of the day. Okay, you guys have got to be aware. My dad's late words, Zisa's words, I cannot describe what I saw with my own eyes. And then I will come back to the education part in a second. Let's just cue up the movie first.
So we're just gonna watch a
For
small part.
a very small part. But when I say it was graphic, this is what my mother was living in Bergen-Belsen every single day. This is what my father saw every single day. This is what humanity was doing to humanity. These people you see lined up here are the commandants of Bergen-Belsen, the people who were running Bergen-Belsen. They were given a job. In a few minutes you're going to see what they had to do. Their job was to do what they made the survivors do. The survivors, in order to be fed food, had to drag the bodies. See that lady walking right there that I just pointed to, by the way? That was Irma Grazer. She was a notorious SS officer. They called her the Laughing Hyena because she would take her riding crop and strangle women for the pleasure, and she would laugh as she was doing this. But you see all these commandants and all these soldiers, and you'll see the few survivors that are standing there applauding. It's because they're about to take the bodies that they were making the survivors do for food. In order to earn food, as a survivor, you had to take the body to the pits. And now you can see how the few survivors, and now you're going to see what Fanny had to endure, and my aunt had to endure, and other Holocaust survivors from Denver had to endure. We didn't want to get too graphic, but you can see. Now we'll go into the slides. And we'll come back to this one. Let's see.
Let's come back to this one.
We'll come back to this one.
Okay.
Yeah. As you can see, do you want me to read it? I'll read it.
Okay.
Fanny Starr, a Holocaust survivor from Denver, Colorado, was liberated from Bergen-Belsen, as we just showed you, on April 15, 1945. In 1985, my parents were gifted the movie from a British TV reporter to use for Holocaust education. And many of you who are here who have seen my parents speak their blessed memories, they showed that particular movie wherever they went. So for the masterpiece of the film, It had to be shown the way it was. As time went on, there was another film that came out where they took this particular movie and altered it in many ways. It then became Night Must Fall. But Starr, again, my father, it was correct. And every day, in any interview we've ever heard about my father, he would say, I cannot describe what I saw with my eyes. He would tell me that every day. And as you just saw, you could not imagine. In the beginning of the movie, which we did not show, you would see the Nazis celebrating Hitler. And this is one example. This was the Hitler-Juden. They were standing in a arena because he had to have his ego fed every day. I'm not kidding you. That sounds familiar. It might be. But he had to have his ego fed, and they did things like this to feed his ego. And how it correlates to the master race. In the comic itself, you'll see here in the next slide, you'll see right here, yes, right there, you'll see him standing at the podium in an arena. In the movie, at the very, very beginning, which we did not show you, you see him being applauded, standing in an arena, smiling and with glee, and everybody going Sieg Heil. Just identical to this comic. Let's go to the next slide. This is when they entered into the camps. You saw, we didn't show you, but we had it queued up to show you the barbed wire. And then again, you'll see where he's, again, loves to be praised and everybody yelling Sieg Heil, Sieg Heil. What's really interesting is Kriegstein, and again, Hitchcock did not know one another, but boy, Kriegstein got this down to a T from this movie. Each one of these slides correlates with the comic book. You can see the pit. You see where they're burying people to push them into the pit? It's just to the T. Nobody knew about that. And now mind you, this is the comic called The Master Race. And there they are, just, sorry, I apologize. Go around.
I'm gonna stand up and be done.
Yeah, please go ahead and point for me. As you can see in the yellow image, you'll see the commandants being forced, but those were the fellow inmates, and putting the people into the mass pits that we just showed you. The one next to it is a still that we pulled from the movie, so you can see the correlation of the two and how they correlate from comic book to reality and back and forth. And these two, one more time, did not know one another at all. They were 10 years apart, and nobody knew about the movie because it was in the Imperial War Museum until 1985. Let's go back to education. We're going to end with Fanny in a minute, but we're going to go back to Holocaust education. And the reason why we're doing all of this is because as we progress, and for those who have known us, my mother and father's mission, no matter how long they've been doing this, was to make sure Holocaust education was taught in all the schools. That was their sole mission. So Fanny would always ask why. And to understand her why, Fanny wanted Holocaust education taught everywhere. You can look at the messages the team will be showing you here as to why we're teaching you. But in July, the picture, Fanny, in July 2020, I'm sorry. Fannie and the Governor Polis signed for the whole state of Colorado, House Bill 20-1336 as Colorado state law. As of July of next year, every school will have to be teaching it no matter what, whether they're ready or not. Here we come. They have to start teaching about the Holocaust. And now the last image of Fanny.
Oh, there she is, I'm sorry.
And this image is my mom standing in front with her mom. We would say in Hebrew, door to door, from generation to generation. The Nazis were pure evil, and they murdered for pleasure. People, you must understand this. It really was truly pleasure that gave them a joy. They would send each other postcards, pictures, like we showed you, but they were pictures. But they made them into postcards, and they would send them to each other to pat each other on the back, saying, "Who did you kill today?" Because it gave them pleasure. You see, and I'm going to quote Fanny, "It was pure pleasure without a conscience. You see, I am incomplete, and I am missing members of my family that were taken from me by the Holocaust. I keep searching for answers. Can someone please tell me why? Why are we allowing history to repeat? And why are the Jews the victims?" Now, for the few who have known my mom, the teachers that are here, isn't that what Fanny would always ask you? Why? Every conversation at Regis, she went to the theologians there. She would ask, why? Why? Why did this happen? Can someone answer that question? And I'll let you ponder it as we go through this, but does somebody have an answer? Because we're going to be listening. And now I'm going to introduce you to Selena, and she's going to be teaching you about comic books and Holocaust.
Okay, the feeling of this may shift a little bit as we enter superheroes. We're going to start with a quote by Stan Lee. People don't usually associate so profound and forbidding a topic as the Holocaust with the costume superheroes and bombastic villains who inhabit the world of comic books. But the truth is that those colorful characters aren't the only residents of the comic book universe, and comic books can serve more purposes than entertainment alone. I'm guessing most of you have heard of Stan Lee. Just checking, not everybody has. He is kind of the face of comic books, especially superhero comic books. He was born Stanley Martin Lieber, in case you didn't know, in 1922, and he did pass in 2018. He is no more from Marvel, though he did start out at Atlas Comics, which is fun. And he worked a lot with my buddy, Jack Kirby, who is Jacob Kurtzberg, born in 1917. Both of these gentlemen were sons of Jewish immigrants. And whether you knew it or not, comic books are a Jewish medium. Get excited. We're going to start here with my friend Max. Maxwell Charles M.C. Gaines, born in 1896, died very young in a boating accident. It broke our hearts. Max is here with Famous Funnies. We've actually got a printout over here. Thank you, Helen. Of a reprint of some of these. Max looked at the Sunday Funnies and one day went, he was unemployed at the time, and he went, "I would pay to just read funnies. I wonder if anybody else would pay to just read funnies." And it turns out people would. So he is actually, although Stan has taken some credit for it, Max is actually credited as the father of comic books. Famous Funnies are really what they first call, and then we move on from there. But Max, when he started Famous Funnies, suddenly everybody else went, "Oh, we could reprint comics from the Sunday Funnies too. We could make some money in this." And so we found competition, and everybody needed to hire somebody to do this. And really what their choices were well, there was originally 218 issues of Famous Funnies that caused this major trend. launching comic books, but they went looking for unemployed writers and artists. They pulled from people who were too young to get real jobs, inexperienced to get real jobs, Jewish who were not allowed to get real jobs, or a combination of all three. There was at that time a blocking, a very anti-Semitic feeling, especially after each of the wars. It hit a major peak 1945 to 1947, and a few groups, a few ad agencies had some anti-Semitic quotas. We would hire a Jewish artist or a writer here and there, but they wouldn't hire too many of them. And so they went, fine, just like in the motion picture industry, which was created by Jewish directors, producers, and executives, the comic books became a Jewish industry. And I'm rather grateful to them. Our first big hero, who is in what I call the punching Hitler category, is Superman. In 1940, Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster said, what would happen if Superman gathered the bad guys and just kind of handled it? How would he end World War II? And they decided that Superman would fly over, pick up Hitler, and I put this quote because it makes me really happy. They wrote it down, and Hitler, once Superman grabs him, Hitler's like, put me down, you are hurting me. He just kind of whines at him. And then he flies over, and he picks up Stalin. And then he just flies them both to Geneva and drops them off for them to be handled there. Like, Geneva, handle these guys, and they're tried for, you know, as being war criminals. This happens 2 years before the U.S. even enters the war. So Superman took care of business before the U.S. even got started. Yeah, I'm seeing, this is February 1940. He is not alone. This is my good friend who was essentially created to punch Nazis in the face. This is Captain America. I see Renee over there, she loves him. She thinks he's going to steal him from me, but he's my boyfriend too. Sorry, I digress. Captain America was created by Joe Simon and Jack Kirby. He had an alter ego, Steve Rogers, a lot of us know this. And Steve is rather weak and submissive, and he takes a magic serum that makes him Captain America. The weak and submissive is a Jewish stereotype, a stereotype of Jewish people that was created by the Nazis, and they made fun of them a lot. And while not true, it was used in the comic books, and so Steve may or may not be representative of that. There's a lot to be said for this. The first one shows Cap punching Hitler in the face. That is the very first Captain America ever released. The Holocaust itself and the persecution of Jewish people didn't actually appear during the war in Timely Comics, which later became Marvel. That didn't show up until much later, but Cap's been punching Hitler out forever. The serum, which is created by Dr. Reinstein in the comics, has been suggested to be a nod to Jewish physicist Albert Einstein. And so while we're making suggestions, we're entertaining suggestions, might we speculate in our minds, we'll have discussion later, friends, why a couple of children of Jewish immigrants might take a character like Steve, holding anti-Semitic Jewish stereotypes, and turn him into a powerful superhero using a serum created by a Jewish genius to be used for knocking out bad guys, specifically Nazis. What can we surmise from the fact that 99% of superheroes have an alter ego? There are every now and then one who, you know, Iron Man, who wants everybody to know who he is. For the most part, those superheroes hide who they are. And there's something in that. A lot of these comic book writers and artists completely change their names. They don't appear as their real names under their pen names. They write with pen names. What might an artist whose people who felt powerless do with a hero who can draw full of power and beat up the bad guys when they don't have that power? So hold those thoughts in your mind. We'll come back to it. Think deep thoughts, solve the problems. Captain America from the Ashes was 1979. You're going to see that in the middle. It's Chris Claremont and Roger McKenzie, with art from Sal and Don Perlin and Sal Buscema. It introduces the Holocaust. There's a bunch of them that talk about the Holocaust, but this one does something special that nobody else does. And that is to be the first to mention Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass. From the Ashes brings in a woman who's Anna Kappelbaum. And she is a Holocaust survivor that appears here. She'll appear later. She is one of my favorite minor characters. She is arguably one of the most important minor characters in the Captain America series. Anna shows up, and she returns in the Calypso Connection, which also talks about something that most comic books don't touch on, and that is the slave orchestras that the Nazis made Holocaust slaves play their instruments to make it look like, to make people feel like, oh no, this is really a safe place. You're okay here. And that's what they showed the outside world. No, look, we have orchestras, it's all good. And Anna was in one of those orchestras. And so Anna shows up in both of these. And in the middle one, she really introduces Captain America to that. And in the Calypso, it turns into a bit of a revenge for Anna. And Anna nearly crosses over. I won't ruin the ending for you. But I would argue that Anna's one of the most important characters that's a minor character in any of these. It touches deeply on survivor trauma even after years and years. You can see her. This is many years after she's escaped the camps. And the heavy trauma that stays with her is heavily addressed in the Calypso Connection. It's a really powerful comic. These are some of my recommendations also. Please feel free to pick up these comics. I don't know that Tattered cover has them, but they can be found at comic books. Yeah, Katie's in the back going, we don't have those. But it's okay. Well, Erin will show you some later that Tattered cover has lots of the graphic novels they've got. Wonder Woman, 1942. She actually started out a little bit earlier. She appears for the first time in 1941, but she gets her own comic books in 1942. These are some really cool things. The top, your top left, Wonder Woman fights off Nazis here on the home front. This is a rarely known thing that most people don't even know happens. The Nazis try to take over America by starving America's children, by making milk too expensive for them to buy. Bad Nazis. And so Wonder Woman fights it there, and that's a powerful comic. It's, Sensation Comics #7 by Marston and Peter. And some of the cool things that she does later. So that's one of the nice earlier ones, but these are some later ones that happen. This guy right here is And Death My Destiny by Conway and Heck. Wonder Woman rescues from the concentration camp 2 children of Friedrich, a Jewish man with psychic powers who's taken hostage by an evil Nazi commander. That's a 1977 one, but this is an earlier where they talk about rescuing people from the camps, especially children. The superheroes didn't get into that as much. They usually are going back, they're doing flashbacks about the camps. Wonder Woman actually goes back and gets some children from the camps. Bottom here is a newer Bombshells United. If you've not heard Bombshells United, it is super fun. They do some alternate realities. And they go back and say, I'm not too proud of what happened in America. So the Bombshells, Wonder Woman centers in that, goes back and rescues Japanese Americans in the 1940s from the camps here in the US. And so that deals heavily with alternate realities and what could we change here. Those are Team Marguerite Bennett and Marguerite Saveau created those alternate universes. This one in the center is one that I want to talk about, and I'm going to move into Batman with that. Both Wonder Woman and Batman, DC in general, who was not DC at the time yet. However, Sensation Comics and World's Finest Comics liked to do covers that did not necessarily relate to the stories, but they were pushing for the war effort. So you saw back here Wonder Woman bowling over the Access Powers down here with their heads. Batman, Robin, and Superman took them out too. We kind of blew them up over here in the middle. None of these stories necessarily connected, but boy, they worked hard for the war effort. There's a really good one out there where they're working hard on their victory garden too, throwing baseballs at the Axis powers. Detective Comics is in the Batman line. You may see his little face up there on the top of the comic. They did 2 for the war effort. And they did it after the war, the 7th War Loan. They're trying to raise money to help out the war effort. We're going to talk a little bit more about Batman later, but Batman and, as you can see, Superman 2 worked a lot on how can we help the war effort with just our covers. And the cover artists here, we see a lot of Dick Sprang and Stan Kay drawing covers for the war effort to raise money and draw attention, and yes, Captain Marvel. Roy Thomas, Gil Kane, and Dan Adkins. This is the first superhero comic to address the Holocaust directly. And you see this is 1969. So before we were kind of punching Hitler in the face, which, you know, I condone it. But this is where we get to the Holocaust itself. We introduce a Holocaust survivor who's a friend of Rick Jones, and this is Mr. Weiss, a Jewish survivor of Auschwitz. I mentioned the ones before where we were talking about survivors, but those comics were all written a lot later than 1969. We may ask ourselves, why did it take so long? Why didn't we get to the Holocaust when it was such a major part of the war? We could speculate that it's more exciting to read about superheroes punching Nazis in the face than to see drawings like the ones Helen showed us earlier. Possibly it still might be so many of the writers and artists were Jewish, they might have struggled with the subject matter. There's other ideas. Think on this, because I don't know that we'll know the answer. You may know better than I. We may make it up. We may never know. It's possible that Captain America writers came up with the idea for my character, my friend Anna, from this issue. Mr. Weiss is a major player in this issue, and he's actually a major hero in the Mad Master of the Murder Maze. Frankly, he saves everybody, including Captain Marvel. Captain Marvel could have done better, but he didn't. He needed rescuing. And Mr. Weiss was the perfect hero that needed to come along at the right time. It's important to touch on Hellboy and Batman.
Yes, Hellboy.
Yeah, and anybody know Hellboy? Yeah, okay. He's one of my favorites. He's so big and scary looking, and frankly, he's a kitten. To the good guys, not to the bad guys. So Dark Horse Comics, for the San Diego Comic-Con #2 in 1993, is where Hellboy first appears. He is summoned by the Nazis to do their bidding. And the Brits and the Americans find him first before the Nazis, you know, they summon him from afar with magic and dark magic, and Rasputin is, it's dark and mystic. But he appears somewhere else, and the Brits and the Americans go, hey, look, that's a little Hellboy, there he is. And they pick him up and they raise him. And then the Nazis find him and they're like, you belong to us, you will do our bidding. And he's like, nah, I'm good. Oh yeah, there's Rasputin. He's really evil. He's so bad.
Just like in Anastasia, Rasputin, right?
It's
Everybody
pretty
remembers
much,
Anastasia, right?
I know.
Yeah.
And so he's just great. He's big and he's scary, and he's really sweet to the good guys. And I just love the character. The development of the character is great. Batman: Night of the Reaper. If you are interested in comics about the Holocaust, I cannot recommend this comic enough. So this has a big long list of folks involved. It's Neil Adams, who is a familiar name, Dick Giordano, and Denny O'Neil. And it talks about Rutland, Vermont superhero-themed comic parade. This is a big thing that's gone on now. It's merged kind of more into a Halloween parade. It's still a good time, I'm told. Go check it out if you're into Halloween. This issue is funny and powerful and moving and terrifying and all kinds of things. So there are a lot of comic book writers and artists that show up in this comic. One I always have to look for his name again. Alan Weiss, who is, he's an artist. He's just roaming, a picture of him roaming throughout the entire comic going, these floats are so cool. Somebody talk about floats with me. Do you guys dig floats? these are great. And he almost gets killed by the Reaper because he's just checked out looking at floats. So essentially, these guys are making fun of all their buddies in the comic. And it is also a revenge plot, a Holocaust survivor tracking a Nazi war criminal. And this time, it's one of the comics for the first time they show the Nazi war criminal has been living in the US. And this was not a thing that had been heard of until the very late 60s, when America went, oh my gosh, no, they can't be here. They went to, you know, Africa or South America, but not here. And so this comic addressed that.
Kind of like Master Race addressing the anonymous one.
Yes.
Because a lot of them did escape anonymously.
Absolutely. And so it took legislation, it took until 1978 for legislation to work on the deportation of Nazi war criminals in the US. And so this was 1971, so we're at about the time, they hadn't quite gotten there yet. Folks, there are so many other superhero comics to explore the Holocaust. We would take way too long to talk about all of them. But I do want to ask, has anybody ever heard of the Joker? Do you know who that is? Give me a couple one-word descriptions of the Joker. Just shout them out. One word. Crazy. What else you got? Did I hear evil? What? Yeah? Lucy, what did you say? Crazy, yeah? Sadistic? Yeah. He'd make a good Nazi, right? Oh no, no. If you needed more proof that comic book writers hate Nazis, I give you the Joker. Because there's this great comic, it's so good. 1996, Marvel and DC, when they would play nice together, they don't do that anymore. Elseworlds, penned by John Byrne and colors by Patricia Mulvihill. Captain America joins with Batman and they fight these two, and the moment that Joker says, wait a minute, you're a Nazi? And Red Skull's like, yeah, and you're a great Nazi too. He's like, oh no, I may be crazy, I may be evil, but I am American crazy evil. And he takes this guy out. Well, it doesn't really work because Joker uses like that little gun that attacks your muscles. Guess what? Red Skull doesn't have muscles, so too bad that doesn't work.
And no matter how many times Captain America tries to take this man out, he reemerges.
And so even Joker is not like even Joker hates it. They did this again later, 2020 Injustice, Year Zero, Number 4, Tormey and Taylor. The same Joker that tricks Superman into killing all of Metropolis also finds out that he's working with Nazis. He's like, oh no, I won't work with Nazis. You guys are evil, far evil than anything I can even imagine. I won't do it. And so that's all the proof you needed about superhero artists not digging Nazis. There you have it. I'm going to touch a couple more things. I want to talk about the Nazi death parade. If you have been looking up and following the stories about Mouse, a lot of the articles talking about Mouse being banned have brought up Nazi death parade. This is heralded as one of the first comics to talk about the Holocaust, at least to show you a detailed site of the death camps. This showed up in 1945. Right about the time that Mouse was being banned, a Dutch historian discovered the original clip of this, the original page, and so that made the news. This is A.M. Froelich. Sorry, Ingrid, my German, I'm sorry. An immigrant in his 60s drew this. And so it's a 6-panel comic, and it was more detailed than anybody had seen. It is possibly the first comic to show the gas chambers. Desert Fox is another one. In 1951, Harvey Kurtzman and Wally Wood wanted to fight the image of Field Marshal Erwin Rommel as a good soldier. The historians from the UK and the US and the politicians said, yeah, we know he's a Nazi, but we think he might have helped try to take out Hitler. We think we might have tried to talk him into suicide. And he was a really good general, so he's cool. And these two comic artists went, no, he's not. He was a big member of the Nazi party before Hitler even joined. We don't like him, he's evil. So they put out the Desert Fox and showed him what he was. Additionally, Desert Fox is the first comic book to directly mention Jews as victim of Nazi persecution. This is 1951, so we go back to the question of why did it take so long? What is suggested in the readings that I have done is most of these artists and writers were Jewish, and they didn't want to draw attention to themselves. They said, no, we don't need to point out that they were Jewish. We want to bring your attention to the Holocaust. We want you to know that the Nazis are evil. We don't need you to know that they were Jewish. We also know that the Jewish people were not the only victims, but they're still never even mentioned until this point, 1951. Along with Desert Fox, there are several war comics. These are, I'm not a huge war comic gal, I'm more of a superhero gal. Some of these are still very cool. If you are sharing these with children, please check them out first. Some of these are not child appropriate. So I'll run through, boy, every time I try to say this, Totentanz, am I close? Yes. Thank you. My German is not strong. Is Dance of Death is what it translates to. And this is the first comic to represent a person who safely smuggled Jewish refugees out of a Nazi country. Nobody had done that before. This is an unknown soldier comic who is a severely wounded soldier who's always wrapped in bandages, but he's a master of disguise. So those are the really cool points about that one. Duty of a Man is artist George Evans, who also served as a World War II aircraft mechanic, making him the perfect person to draw war aircrafts. This is the second half of this series is sort of like a Quantum Leap plotline. So Death assigns this Polish soldier, John Kowalski, who has already passed, to jump into the bodies of other soldiers to see where he can help. This particular one, Duty of a Man, he jumps into a German soldier, a German officer, who is made to collect Jewish refugees and kill them. Does he? I'm not going to tell you. What is the duty of a man, you may ask yourself? You'll find out. Read the comic. Thou Shall Not Kill, like you might imagine, is weird war tales. They get to deal with some supernatural cool stuff. This is supernatural, and this is what Nazi soldiers find out what happens when they ridicule rabbis who ask golems for help. I love this comic. Mark Our Graves is a tale from the fighting team known as the Losers. Now, the Losers are a group of men who are the last lone survivors of different groups who have, everybody in their groups have died, so they ended up as their own teams, so they're called the Losers. This introduces a couple of things. It introduces comics to the Jewish Brigade, which has not appeared in any other comic before, 5,000 all-Jewish brigade of soldiers. And it talks about the Jews living in German-occupied Arab countries. And that is also not usually addressed in any other comic book. Walls of Blood was a big risk. Whoops, no, Desert Fox, I'm done with you. Walls of Blood was rough. Kubert and Kangier decided they would take a risk and tell these comics from the perspective of the Germans. And they want you not to sympathize with them, but they hoped it would be more realistic. And they hoped it would add some authenticity to their comic. They want people to take the stories more seriously, and they wondered, would that work? My question to you for your mind while you're contemplating deep questions is, which do you suppose might be taken more seriously? Superhero comics, war comics? It's an interesting thought. I won't tell you what I think because you'll laugh at me. Horror comics, again, I'm not big on this one, but I do want to tell you about a couple. Please, please do not show these to children unless you've looked. Actually, even after you look at them, don't show them to children.
This is still a horror comic.
Is that what you got there? Rasputin, technically not a horror comic. Horror comics are worse.
Oh, really?
Oh, they're so dark. The Tattooed Heart, 1953. This is by Harry Harrison. Funny enough, writers' names don't show up on most horror comics, only the artists. I don't know what that's about. Harry Harrison is based on true stories from the camps and involves the use of human skin in making lamps.
True story.
It is a true story, and it's horrifying. It is, however, one of the few comics to ever mention the Nuremberg trials. The first Rocket by Bill Everett is in which Hitler uses German science to escape to the moon and plan a new invasion of Earth. But the space cadets stop him. In Escape from Majdanek, did I do that? Thank you.
Got it.
Vince Napoli offers some extremely graphic drawings of life and death in the camps. This is one of the few camps that was not destroyed by the Germans as they left. And so its full horrors were apparent when the Allies captured it. And the pictures in there are very graphic, much like Helen's film that she showed. Experiment in Fear is by Archie Goodwin. For those of you that don't know, he did Luke Cage. That's a big fighter. Yeah, so this is, and Gene Colan, don't want to ignore him. They're both huge names in Marvel and DC. This story brings to light some of the horrific experimentation done on prisoners in the camps, and there's a twist at the end of that comic, but it's, the experimentation was incredibly dark and it just got worse and worse and worse. And so some of those horror comics, they're horror comics for a reason, and they are dark.
Hence the word master race.
Yes. Now, if you were a big comic fan, there is one person that is conspicuously left out of my whole set. Here he is, Magneto. He is known as a what? Oh yes, we're gonna get there. So this is the book. Now this comic is almost impossible to find. This is one of the most wonderful comics in the entire collection. And unfortunately, it's a limited comic that was, what's the word I want? It was shortly lived. It didn't, they cut it off, and it was stupid of them, frankly, because it's an incredible comic.
So you see the imaging, how they all are alike?
Yeah, so we're showing you the Warsaw Ghetto Boy. And they called back to him with Magneto out there. It's not quite, Magneto's fighting and he's surrendering. However, it is a callback. If you saw the movies, this is one of the first scenes you see in the very first X-Men movie. In the comics, you'll see, if you get a chance to get your hands, I recommend it, Magneto Testament. They tell Magneto's whole story from the beginning. Now they tried to keep it the way canon. However, they do change his story a little bit if you've seen the movie. It's dark, but they did it very historically accurate. They put in references, and at the very back, there's a teacher's guide. This is an incredibly powerful comic. It's very well drawn. That's the back.
Yes,
Oh, you're doing that deliberately. Okay.
Key word, our Mike Fry.
Yeah, and it's out of print, which is heartbreaking. But the X-Men were a very important Holocaust set. Because of Magneto, Kitty Pryde was always seen wearing a Star of David necklace too. And the X-Men, I just don't have time to get into all the X-Men wonderfulness that is the X-Men. They're one of my favorites. I do want to touch on The Last Outrage, which is a part of the very back of this comic. This is Dinah Babbitt. She recently passed away. She was a comic book artist. She wasn't a comic book artist, she was an artist. She was one of the lead animators on Daffy Duck, Speedy Gonzales, after the Holocaust. She married Art Babbitt, who is the creator of Goofy and the lead animator on Dopey. So she was sent to the camps with her mother. I'm going to give you the very quick story on her. And she had already been doing art since she was a very small child. You can see the drawing of her down there. And when she got to the camp, somebody found her and said, hey, I know you draw art. So she was asked to come and paint this beautiful mural of Snow White, and the kids asked her to do the dwarves too, so she started adding the dwarves in the barracks of the children who were essentially waiting to be killed. And it calmed them and it made them happier. And Mengele, if you haven't heard of him, the angel of death, Joseph Mengele, found her. She was sure she was dead as soon as he found her. Instead of killing her, he took her back and made her paint portraits of the Roma. He decided that he couldn't get the right coloring with photographs, so he wanted her to paint them with watercolors so he could prove that their coloring made them inferior to him. And so she painted all these portraits. She did manage to survive with her mother, They both survived the Holocaust, and the paintings were eventually found. After she married Art, she had a great career in cartooning, and they found her paintings. The Auschwitz Museum found her paintings. And they said, hey, they finally found her and said, hey, we've got your paintings. And she, great, and she bought a big suitcase and she went, and they will not return her paintings. And at this point, 450 comic creators, as I've written up there, got involved in the fight. The whole story has been put into comic at the back of this comic book. Oh, easy, microphone. And they have been working very hard for years to get her paintings back. Now, she just passed away a few years ago, so now it's for her family. But they tell her whole story back here, and the Auschwitz Museum will not return her paintings. For several reasons. They said, well, no, if we return your paintings, then any survivor will think they can have their stuff back. And we're like, yes. Like, well, they really actually belong to Mengele. And we're like, no, they don't. The US government has made a special request. Please return them. At this point, literally everybody has done anything, so Auschwitz Museum is in trouble in my book. I have no power. However, it's a very important story that all of these comic book artists have gotten deeply into, and you can read more about it. If you Google her name, you will find out all about it, but this has become a very huge action amongst all of these comic book artists. And now from here, I will send you to Erin, who will tell you more about graphic novels for the classroom.
And the books are all.
Yeah, a variety of the books are over here. So hello, I've been teaching secondary language arts and English for about 10 years now. And these are a sampling of books that I have used or I've encouraged other educators to use in the classroom. And we're gonna start you off with like super niche, may not have heard of it, I'm just kidding, Mouse. The story behind Mouse is really interesting. It started off, chapters started appearing in 1980 in the anthology Raw, and then came together as Mouse 1 in 1986 of A Survivor's Tale, My Father Bleeds History. It is a story within a story. So we have Art Spiegelman, who is bringing to life his relationship with his father, Vladek, and he is interviewing Vladek throughout the piece, as well as covering some of his mother's experiences during the Holocaust. And so it's flashing back to Vladek's experiences as he tells the story. And Spiegelman is showing himself kind of going through an emotional transformation of getting to know his father and like smoothing out the difficult relationship he had with his father, as well as coping with his own mother, Anya's suicide in 1968. And it was, as Selena mentioned earlier, it's been banned in a variety of locations. One particular place in Tennessee because of profanity and nudity and depiction of violence and suicide, which just fascinates me to no end for that decision making. But I teach it and my students love it. And if we could go to the next. So I've kind of broken this up into different nonfiction, including Mouse, nonfiction and then fiction works. Our next slide, we cover two pieces, Survivors of the Holocaust and When I Grow Up. Survivors of the Holocaust is actually a variety of, based off of a variety of interviews from folks, survivors who were living in Leeds in the UK. It includes a variety of maps and photographs and rendering and primary documents from their experiences. It has an afterword that describes, some of their adult life, as well as a glossary and a timeline and references. It's really super helpful in the education environment. And it covers it covers children's experiences, survivors from a variety of countries, Germany, Czechoslovakia at the time, Poland and France. And then we also have When I Grow Up, which was found in a church cellar in 2017. It's compiled of a variety of biographies that were written for a contest. And so at the time, in the 1930s, the Yiddish Scholarly and Cultural Organization was holding a writing contest, like many of my students do today, of please write about what you would like to do when you grow up. And hundreds were found in this church, and 6 of them are featured in this piece. And it's kind of focuses on the richness of Eastern Europe's Yiddish-speaking communities and covering children from a variety of perspectives. Some of the kids wanted to grow up and go off to college and do, academia, and some of them wanted to do, more trade schools, and just finding pieces, as much as we could find variety from those 6, of so many different teenage lives. A Bag of Marbles is based off of an autobiographical novel by Josef Joffo. And he fled the Nazis with his brother in real life. And the graphic novel tells that story of them fleeing Nazi-occupied Paris in 1941. And they traveled by train and foot and ferry in an attempt to reach safety. A lot of it is also dealing with that tightrope that they had to walk, balancing their Jewish identities and trying to keep their Jewish identities secret, yet stay true to themselves, which is, children struggle with identity to begin with, and so then to have to do that was very challenging. And Anne Frank's diary, we also have this over here, has been transformed into a graphic novel, and it is really beautiful if you get the chance to ever obtain a copy of this. It is the only graphic novelization of her diary that has been authorized by the Anne Frank Foundation and that uses direct text from the diary. It is edited because her diary was quite extensive, and to put it into that graphic novel format. But her humor and her sarcasm is still kind of very vivid throughout. Some diary entries are included in their entirety, while others are more edited snippets. And this is also something that, as an educator, I found is super helpful. Anne Frank is often turned to at the middle school level, and even early high school, usually maybe around 9th or 10th grade. And a lot of reluctant readers or struggling readers grapple with it because just the language was so different at the time in the 1940s, and for a 12-year-old today, that feels like a million years ago. And so to get a struggling reader or somebody who might be reluctant access into this beautiful story, it's really wonderful for that.
And the book was also banned.
It's among many, yeah.
No, this particular book was the recent one banned in Texas.
Yeah. Faithful Spy is fascinating. It was named a best book in 2018 by NPR, and it covers a true story of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who formed a breakaway church. So he was already a pastor, and he strongly disagreed with what was happening. And so what he decided to do, and he was frustrated with the German church and their inaction during the Holocaust, and so his breakaway church ends up outlawed by the Nazis, and he becomes a fugitive, and he is grappling again with identity, and he wants to develop a plot to assassinate Hitler. And he's grappling with that idea with his faith as well, thou shalt not kill, but I want to kill Hitler, which again, I can't say I disagree with. And so going through that at the time was very challenging. It's a really wonderful story. And then there's a series, Chutz-POW, which is an ongoing comic book series from the Holocaust Center of Pittsburgh. Each volume is its own anthology telling a variety of true stories from survivors and other heroes of World War II. So some of it is directly like memoir type or biographical type stories, and then some of it is more historical based, but really fascinating work and really interesting. And you can, if you are thinking of using that sort of thing in education, it allows you to kind of zoom in on specific topics or areas of focus. And then some fiction pieces. I Survived is a New York Times best-selling series. They have them in a variety. Like this one is focusing on the Holocaust. I know we have this one in our school library at Caryl. But they also have like 9/11 and all of these other like disasters and events, worldwide events. This particular one focuses on the character of Max and his sister Zena, who escape from the Nazis into a nearby forest. Their father is taken away, and they are found by the Jewish resistance fighters and brought to a safe camp, and then that also becomes in peril, and so it's their survival story. It has beautiful back matter that includes historical photos and facts about the war and the Holocaust in particular. Auschwitz is this gorgeous black and white and shades of gray piece that focuses on this like sense of desperation of two characters, Kazik and Cecia. The narrative is not linear. It kind of goes back and forth, and it feels a little bit herky-jerky sometimes, but it also is doing that on purpose to kind of bring back that fragmentation of memory that comes from survivors having experienced something from such a long time ago. And trauma as well can affect memory for sure. And the shades of gray are focused on that driving home that bleak situation and hopelessness that they felt. It also includes interviews, research, a glossary, and direct reproduction of some survivor testimony. These two pieces, The War Within These Walls, is super interesting to me. It is a fictionalized account of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. And from this perspective, it is from the character's perspective, Misha. His family has been moved to the Warsaw Ghetto, and they are struggling for obvious reasons. And he ends up resorting to crawling through the sewers to smuggle food. And one day he joins the members of the resistance who plan to make that stand against the Nazis during the uprising. And Yosel is actually an alternative reality story. So Joe Kubert immigrated from Poland to the United States in 1926. But he imagines what would it have been like had they not done that, and had his 15-year-old self still been in Poland when the Nazis came through. And so he does this alternate reality imaginative experience in Yosel where he is still an aspiring artist, which he was, but in the US and not Poland, and describes what that would have been like for an aspiring artist who's 15 and suddenly forced into the Warsaw Ghetto. It is also drawn in black and white, and it is also purposefully drawn in kind of a crude manner, like very rough, in order to emphasize that oppressive atmosphere and the cruelty of the ghetto, and then the brutality as well of the uprising, which was unsuccessful, ultimately unsuccessful. White Bird is by the same author of Wonder, which I'm sure many of us have heard of. It's such a beautiful book. And so we are expanding now on some characters from Wonder in this graphic novel. It focuses on Julian's grandmother from the Julian from the novel, grandmother, who is the protagonist here. And it focuses on this power of kindness. It has the message of the power of kindness in the face of the perils of war and oppression. The grandmother tells Julian at some point during the graphic novel, it always takes courage to be kind, but in those days, such kindness could cost you everything. It drives home the fear that folks had as well of like, am I going to get betrayed by a neighbor? Am I going to get betrayed by a family member even, depending on the circumstances? And it covers her story of being hidden by a family in a French village that is occupied by Nazis. And we also learn throughout the book that the boy she and her classmates once kind of shunned in like teenage drama land becomes actually one of her saviors and one of her best friends. And it's just a really beautiful piece. Hidden is wonderful for younger readers, so maybe elementary, maybe middle, late elementary age. It's very gentle, it's very poetic, and it focuses on a night when a grandmother and granddaughter are struggling to sleep, they're up late at night, and the grandma is asked by the granddaughter, why are you so sad? You seem sad all the time. And so she tells her granddaughter Elsa about her experiences in Nazi-occupied Paris. She was a young Jewish girl at the time. She tells her about having to wear the star, being ostracized at school, her teachers and her classmates, and eventually the story of how she ends up hidden under a wardrobe while the Nazis are raiding her home and arresting her parents. And so the character is like, as a young child, listening to this happen. And throughout the conversation, Elsa, the granddaughter, asks wonderful questions that really might mirror the types of questions that a young kid would come up with as they read the novel. So she's kind of this like vessel through which the young readers can learn about the story. And the emphasis throughout is definitely more on kind of like Mr. Rogers, look for the helpers, very much on the helpers instead of the folks who committed the atrocities.
It's phenomenal.
It is. And this is a trilogy, the Resistance trilogy, that focuses on Paul, Sophie, and Marie, who are 3 siblings, and it kind of tracks their experiences over time. In the first one, their father is a prisoner of war being held by the Germans, and their friend Henri has to go into hiding. And this is when the siblings decide, we're going to take a stand, we are not going to let this continue to happen to us. And they convince members of the French resistance to let them contribute. In defiance, the French military police are tightening control over the town, and they are increasingly developing tension around how can we continue to support the resistance while also not getting caught. And then in victory, the Allies are coming in, they're moving to retake France, and the siblings go to Paris to deliver some top secret intelligence to the resistance, and they are among the youngest members of the French resistance. And we're getting close to the end here. The last couple of ones I wanted to touch on are the Family Secret, and The Search. And so these are both interconnected pieces through the character of Joran. In A Family Secret, Joran finds a photo album that reminds him and his grandmother of some really painful memories she's got kept from World War II. He brings it up to her and she tells him about her life under the German occupation of the Netherlands and how she believes that her father, who was a policeman and a Nazi sympathizer, turned her Jewish best friend Esther into the Nazis. And then in The Search, we actually switch over and we focus on Esther. And she's telling her tale of fleeing the Nazis to her grandson, Daniel, who just so happens to be friends with Joran. And so they have this like wonderful weaving together. And these are published by the Anne Frank House, and they are also accompanied by teaching materials geared toward a secondary, middle school audience. And I just wanted to end my section with this quote from Art Spiegelman from The Complete Mouse. Yes, life always takes the side of life, and somehow the victims are blamed. But it wasn't the best people who survived, nor did the best ones die. It was random. And this is something that is so challenging when you're teaching this kind of material to young students. Especially middle schoolers have this sense of bravado of, well, I would have done blah, 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 you know? And one of the things I try to drive home to my students is like, we never know, you know? We have to, you read these stories and you hear of this suffering, and you can't know until you're in such an impossible situation. And driving home that kind of empathy as well. And I just think that this is a wonderful quote for that purpose.
And so you may be thinking, oh no, if that's the end, then I need more comic book information and more graphic novels. And here's the good news. On November 9th, we will be showing the film adaptation of the graphic novel adaptation of the Anne Frank Diary. This is in advance of the US screening, so this has not been seen yet in the United States. Students, Holocaust survivors, and educators do get comp tickets. I will give you the email address for that in just a second. First, I will let you view this pretty screen for a moment. Ari Folman, the director, who is an Oscar-nominated director, will be here for a Q&A after the screening, and we'll talk to you about it. It is at the Elaine Wolf Theater, the JCC Denver. It is the 20th annual Fred and Audrey Marcus Holocaust Lecture. So we've been doing this for 20 years, and this year I'm so looking forward to it. If you would like those tickets, here is an email address. Ta-da! There are also flyers right over there.
Right over there.
In addition to the flyer for the Marcus Lecture, there is a flyer for the Holocaust Awareness Institute's Survival and Witness site. And on that site, we have highlighted profiles of 4 Colorado survivors, and you can dig into their life histories, their stories of the Holocaust. There are maps, there's timelines, there's glossary terms, stories, videos, pictures, everything to see and learn. We are building that site. Soon it will be translated into Spanish, and we will eventually be adding more and more profiles. These are all Colorado survivors, so they are people that you could meet every day. They might be in this room. Actually, I happen to know none of them are, but they might have been. You never know. With this, we really want to thank you. We want to open to see if there's anybody with burning questions, comments, deep thoughts. You have solved answers to questions we have posed during this panel, and you want to tell everybody the answers that you now know, or you want to know questions that answers questions. Yes. Hi.
For us baby boomers, we'll remember the fact that comics in the classroom were verboten, absolutely. And so what I'd like to ask Erin is, how do you achieve a balance between using graphic novels, which can be very powerful, and sort of the need to have students read the actual original text in its full form?
Good question.
That's wonderful. Yeah, so a lot of these pieces, one of the things that I love about them is they do have a lot of educational support materials within the novel itself, or like they will have direct testimony or imagery or pictures or primary sources throughout. Even if they don't, I try to provide them. And so I'll go through and we'll, be creating a unit, and I'll go and look at a variety of narratives, a variety of memoir pieces from survivors, and to actual historical documents, maybe some of the little bit more dry materials. But I'll have the students look, and then we also do visual analysis. So we're not just reading the graphic novel for the story, but we're looking at why does I brought it up a couple of times in terms of like use of black and white or kind of a rough drawing. Why does the author construct the panels in this way? What do you think the message is by using speech bubbles that have spikes instead of round? And like we go through and we really analyze and deconstruct these pieces and use the primary sources to guide us. Like if we know X, Y, and Z about the Warsaw Uprising, then why do we think it was depicted in such a way in this artistic piece? And that provides a lot of challenges for the students to critically think about artistic choice, to critically think about why they chose to use such shading and coloring, and why, for instance, with Anne Frank, if we have an entire written piece, what do we think that some of the strategic thoughts were behind putting together this graphic novel? Like, how do we know, why do we think that the creators here went through and chose the diary entries that they did, or the excerpts that they did, or maybe perhaps instead of having the entry written, there are some like visualizations. So that kind of thing. We try to really dig into it, and it's not simply just, here kids, we're reading comics. But like we blend it together with the nonfiction pieces.
May I elaborate on that? What you just said is correct, but for example, in Master Race, it was actually written in 1954. They wouldn't let them publish it because the school board went around saying, this is mentally disturbing for children. We cannot have this in our schools. You're mentally hurting them. And mind you, the school boards were not the Jews on the school boards. They did not get the message. You're right. So besides that, there's part 2 to that.
And I didn't talk about the comics code because I realized my section was already really, really long. And I was already talking longer than anybody else on this panel, so I cut it out.
We will bring that.
We'll we'll do part 2. Volume 2 of this panel will happen eventually. Shana.
Yeah, that's actually something I was wondering, but I can't think of a great way of formulating it. But I've only read graphic novels as like an 18 plus, and sometimes I have found they're really visceral because they're graphic and they really can be traumatizing. Some I've never been able to go back to and read a second time because the images are still seared in my mind. So I wonder, as an educator, how do you just, that's my, I don't know what the exact question is, but how do you just balance that or figure out the right way of using those materials?
Oh, absolutely.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and it depends on the grade level. It depends on the maturity level of the students. But one of the things I do is offer variety. So I have it scaffolded so that I'm not necessarily having all of the kids read this one particular piece. There are some that I would have parental permission involved. So I would have to, send something home and just say, this is going to be extremely graphic. This is going to have some disturbing imagery. Please provide permission if this is okay with you and your family. And when it comes to the kids, I give them those warnings as well. I want them to go in eyes wide open and not just be completely taken off guard by what it is. And then I provide them with a variety of options because some kids, I don't care who you are, not every 8th grader is ready for mouse. They're just not. That has heavy, 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 heavy topics. And so I'll have it as an option, but I also have other options as well so that they can still access and learn without feeling like they have to be forced into something that might give them nightmares. We do cover some things, whole class of course, but without maybe some of the graphic imagery that you might see perhaps in some of the visual mediums. So I don't shy away from telling them the statistics or the information or some of the terrible things that happened in the camps, but it's one thing to hear about it and it's one thing to see the photographs, and so it's just a matter of trying to balance that with the kids.
So Shana, you know my mom and my dad, so imagine them trying to sleep with this imagery still back in their head. I've shown the movie in detail to Deborah Horning's class, and I've always wondered what you just asked. Do these kids walk away and forget about what they saw, or does it linger in their head right before they eat lunch?
Oh, it lingers. It absolutely lingers. I always warn them that what they're going to hear from you involves very detailed, graphic information. And even though they're 10th graders, to choose what they need. If they need to leave the room, they have permission to leave the room. If during the movie they need to get up and leave the room, they can leave the room. But it is a discussion that comes afterwards, and it's like, it's real. And I said it's hard in today's society of media where what's the next horror movie we can watch to believe it's real. That's the thing I think we struggle with too.
Same with Dr. McCabe. We've shown your students the movies or through the years, and these are college students. I can't imagine how they also felt after visualizing this because they're in their 20s already. So how have they felt afterwards?
Well, a lot of them ask questions. A lot of them come to the office to see what more can be revealed or what they want to process it. But we also do that in the classroom. We have to do that in the classroom.
And same here with Erin. We've come to the school. We haven't shown the movie, but they've listened to Fanny's story, and they've asked questions in a different way. And I find it to be very interesting as well. But they also went and immersed themselves into this. I mean, they really immersed themselves as a school project, right? I mean, they've done this and it's phenomenal.
Lucy,
I'm still in school.
nice and loud theater student.
I'm still in school, and even in like 7th or even elementary school, we've been shown things of the Holocaust, and I'm glad we have, so that we're shown like to not repeat history and
it's gonna really change the world. I think we're gonna change the world. 3 women, powerful, we're gonna go out there and we're gonna change the world. We're gonna go, no,
And I'm glad you spoke up too. I'm glad to see you here, oh young person here. We've got a couple of young people who are still in school because y'all are far in future. There's Erin, she's here. But yeah, it's there. When I first mentioned this, I had a couple of people ask, Holocaust in the comic. Are you guys gonna write the comic books too? No, they already exist. Really? I didn't know that. And so spreading the awareness is a big part too, that there are other ways to learn. There's lots of ways to learn. But the other sheer number of people who go, what's the Holocaust? I haven't heard of that. I don't know what that is. And the other terrifying thing is, well, that's so severe it couldn't ever happen again. But a lot of them don't realize they didn't begin by taking it, like we didn't start out one day and go, okay, everybody we don't like, you're going to a camp, go. It started much slower. It started restricting rights. It started, taking away certain privileges. And so that's where
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
You didn't.
Well, and I do feel that folks are also very Western focused, but when we think about the modern day and in a variety of different places around the world, it's not as if genocides aren't still happening.
That's
correct.
They are still happening now, and they have been happening. And so that's one of the things that I remind my students as well. My students, and bless their little hearts, like 7th, 8th grade, they're very idealistic, which is wonderful, and I want to harness that. But they also think, this will never happen in humanity again. And I'm like, kiddos, it already is. It has been. And so I feel like that's something that's really important because we need to try to stop these things, and I think that just because it hasn't happened perhaps in specific areas of Western Europe or in the United States in recent years doesn't mean it's not happening in our global community.
Correct. I mean, look at just what happened this last week. I'm gonna bring it up about Kanye West wanted to go DEF CON, right? I mean, imagine a young Jewish kid, I'm just saying, hearing this word, we're gonna go DEF CON on you Jews. Imagine a Holocaust survivor hearing that, we're gonna go DEF CON on you Jews. I mean, again, just like Erin and everybody else up here, and Selena and all of you, it is happening again. This is very real. You can open the door and you can hear it go right to your face. It's happening, whether it's not as extreme as maybe the Holocaust extreme, but you don't have to have it extreme. It just takes one person to say one thing, who's famous, and it spreads like wildfire, like a match on Tinder. That's all it takes. In social media, match on Tinder. That's all it takes. And so that's why we are where we are. And again, I always tell people, especially young minds, be careful what you put out there on social media. It's gonna come back and it will stay with you forever. They never erase that.
It's Reggie.
Yeah.
Is it Reggie?
Yes.
Hi Reggie, what do you got?
I wasn't gonna say anything, but
Nice and loud.
I wasn't gonna say anything, but with Kanye West, he's also the one that said black people chose to be enslaved.
Well, and I think Kanye West has some mental health issues that need to be addressed.
We know, we all know he is, but still.
I mean, and I say that with seriously, but.
With hopes that he will get what he needs to.
Yeah, of course.
Yes.
That's not, I didn't mean that in a flippant way.
No, there's,
But we look at it this way, anything in the politics is happening in our world right now. Whether we want it or not, we are being divided. Yesterday, Colorado had its own laws that they're passing in the state legislature about, besides critical race theory, about all of the theories. Do we teach social studies? Do we take that away? I mean, when I heard this last night, I was like, are you kidding us? If we don't teach social studies, ethics, or civil classes, students are not going to know how to treat one another. They're not going to know about these past atrocities, from slavery to the Holocaust to genocides that have happened throughout the world. If we take this away from history and teaching them in social studies, which is history, no one is going to learn this. And this is a mission that everyone in this room, you have to think about what you're gonna do to make that difference, because right now, it's real. Don't say, oh, it isn't gonna happen here, but by Colorado legislation voting to eliminate history, think about that a minute. And that's real, that's happening as we speak. I think the vote was up today or tomorrow, that this is coming back to legislation to revote. And this is our school board.
On that note, are there other questions? Yes.
Have you made a bibliography of all the things you talked about? Because I want that.
Yes,
Yes.
we have.
Thank you.
Actually, I believe at this moment we have two, because one of them was accidentally cut offline, so we have to combine them. If you email this address, I will
Okay.
get that to you.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
yes. Mhm.
Okay, thank
I
you.
think it's in did we put that in MLA or APA? I don't know. It's in a, yes, we have it.
We have it.
Great.
We do have that.
We
Thank
do.
you.
Including the movies.
Which reminds
Oh,
me that I
thank
would very much like to tell you all, I did a check this week on the Tattered Cover site. Nearly every book that Erin has talked about is available at the Tattered Cover. If it is not available at the Tattered Cover, they are going to be very happy to order them for you. I know, for example, the last two that were series, both of the first books are available here on site right now, but I think they'd have to order the second and third and the second for you. Mile High Comic has all of the comics pretty much that I've got for you except this one, and you can fight me for it, but maybe if we all write letters to Marvel and ask them to reprint it, they might consider that. I don't understand why they have not reprinted it, because they're dumb. I know, I'm so mad because it's such a wonderful comic. I've reread it again and it's, I'm babbling. Other questions?
Wait a minute, I'm gonna elaborate. Also, the original movie that we did show is available on PBS, but you have to
Yes.
put it in very specific that it's memory of the camps, because it also shows up Night Would Fall, and that's been doctored and edited and all of that stuff. But this movie that we did specifically for 1985, it is on PBS. It is called Memory of the Camps. I will, again, be very explicit. It is very graphic.
It is.
It is very graphic, from the beginning to the end.
Thank you.
Well, on behalf of Erin, Helen, and myself, Tattered Cover, Holocaust Awareness Institute, the University of Denver, thank you all so much for coming out tonight. We really appreciate you learning about the Holocaust, spreading the word. We hope we'll see you at the Marcus Lecture. Again, do not hesitate. I promise I will personally answer your emails at this email address, so you can email it. It will not be lost in cyberspace. We will get those emails, so send them all in. And thank you again for being here tonight. And thank you, Katie, who did all the setup for our whole thing.
And Adam is not here, but we also thank Adam, the other Adam.
Oh, and this Adam too.
And Ingrid and Adam, and Ingrid for all of your help here, and Adam, you too.